Will the college football playoff ranking committee punish Ole Miss for not playing a game this weekend? We'll see exactly what that looks like when we come back. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. We're going to talk with Dalen Flowers in just a second about tonight's rankings when they get released. Right now, USC's up on Seton Hall by 1 point with 3 seconds left. I think we're going to be okay, but we'll see exactly how that goes. All right, so today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if that bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to bet across the app. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and give us a like, subscribe, and comment on this video on your way out. And find a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college and pro, is available for you. Dalen, this basketball game will not end. I mean, the ranking show was listed as between 7 and 8, and it is 7:45, and this game is still going on.
Yeah, this is the time of the year where these early basketball tournaments start kind of mixing in with college football. We're hoping to get these, college football playoff shows starting soon, and then it's going to be a fun one. Like you said, Ole Miss definitely has a lot of talking about what's transpired over the last few weeks, and there were a lot of teams, right behind Ole Miss in the rankings. Some teams that are a little bit farther behind that really have maybe a chance to kind of maybe hover around Ole Miss or maybe even jump in the playoff committee's mind after Ole Miss didn't play this past weekend. So, I think we're getting closer to this ending of this game, but it should be a fun topic of discussion today.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. It was like 1.8 seconds, and I have no idea what they're doing on this game. But this game is a complete ref show. I think USC has shot like 25 free throws in the second half. This is the second half that will not end. And everybody knows the drama that is going on around Ole Miss right now. Everybody knows the story of what's happening. And the question that everybody is thinking of is, will the committee punish Ole Miss for doing that? That is the question. Why is Seton Hall at the line?
No
Good
idea.
grief. USC, just with 1.8 seconds left, they fouled Seton Hall with no time left. No time went off the clock at all. Absolutely ridiculous. He missed the free throw at least. All right. But do you think the committee will actually punish Ole Miss over this Lane Kiffin situation of having an adult kind of sell out these kids, and these kids' playoff run just kind of gets erased because of this adult?
I wouldn't be surprised. And I say that because I know the historical context of what Ole Miss has faced from the national media and the perspectives from rankings and previous years, rankings this year. I think it was a very big shock to me. Just a few weeks ago, Texas Tech beats BYU, and then the committee that following week would put Texas Tech over Ole Miss, that still had a better resume for the entire season. I get that kind of recency bias at that moment where they had just had college game day there and they beat BYU, et cetera, et cetera. But I wouldn't be shocked. The committee has their ways, and I think they still continue trying to undervalue what Ole Miss has done this year. And I think this is in a way, an easy way out for them to say, okay, you guys didn't play this week, and you're in the midst of a coaching saga, which is seemingly looking like you're not going to have your coach for the playoffs. Let's toy around with them, So I wouldn't be surprised. I definitely think it wouldn't be ethically right to do so, but I definitely wouldn't be surprised by what the committee's thinking, what they're doing, because we've seen it before, and not just with Ole Miss either, but we've seen it before. So I wouldn't be surprised if they take that into notice.
All right, remember, if you're commenting, we're going to try and put your comments up in the third segment. Please put where you're commenting from. We're curious about that. We're going to spend the third segment of the show on that. We're waiting on them to go to the college football playoff show, and it's just a little bit of a mess right now. Just waiting for it to happen. Dalen's going to be here about 10 more minutes is all he can be here. But because of that basketball game, that kind of messed up our live stream a little bit as well. So, Dalen, when it looks to playoffs, a home playoff game, let's say there's a home playoff game in Oxford, Mississippi. Ole Miss is the 6th or the 7th seed because that's kind of the honey spot to begin with.
Yeah.
What do you think? You think that's possible? Do you think it's likely ending up that way?
I think so. I think that the chips may fall a little bit higher for Ole Miss in terms of what may happen in, the final rivalry weekend and as well conference championship weeks. It's also not out of the horizon for Ole Miss to still be in the SEC championship game. It's highly unlikely, but it's still not an impossible feat for Ole Miss to still make an appearance in that. But in saying that, I think a greater totality is, if Ohio State or Indiana ends up playing in the Big Ten championship game, I still think both of those teams will get in. But, say Ohio State blows out Indiana or vice versa, how does the committee then affect those rankings in terms of, okay, if Ole Miss wins out, do they place Ole Miss in front of Indiana or Ohio State? Same thing with the SEC championship game. If, Texas A&M and, say, Georgia played each other and Georgia blows out A&M or vice versa, how do the rankings then be affected in terms of Ole Miss really, only had one loss this year, and it was a close-fought victory to Georgia on the road? How do you then gauge those victories and losses and point differentials? I think that Ole Miss is in a great point because although they are in the midst of a lot of outside noise, they still control their own destiny. And a lot of these games are against teams that, may not have the greatest resume, but Ole Miss really, really, really has to give props to Oklahoma. They went to Norman, Oklahoma, and defeated the Oklahoma Sooners. And since that game, Ben Venables and his team really just took a stance. They went to Tennessee and beat the Volunteers. They went to Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama. And that's really helped Ole Miss in a lot of varieties, I believe. And so I think Ole Miss is in a great place right now. So if you win Friday, you still have that, that 6, 7 spot, maybe even 5, differing on a lot of different things. But I think Ole Miss is really in control because I don't see how, even if Oregon, even when Oregon beat USC, how they could still place Oregon in front of Ole Miss, even if Ole Miss and Oregon both went out the regular season. I don't see how that's a possibility, or Notre Dame, or a few teams right behind Ole Miss. So I think that 6, 7, maybe 5 spot is a great position for Ole Miss to be in a highly likely position as well.
All right, when we come back, we will give the top 25 countdown in just a second with Dalen Flowers, as long as we can keep him. But first, I do want to tell you about FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel. It's the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It helps keep every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when that first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel and sign up today to play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcatcher you're listening to and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but helps keep all of this free. Locked On is getting ready to change the game yet again, all in the name of having fun following your team. It's coming in December. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network in the country. Thank you very much for that. All right, Dalen. Tulane is in the top 25. So Ole Miss has one win already over a top 25 ranked team, and if they're the highest in there, they're going to end up getting the G5 spot, which means that Ole Miss would have be 2-1 against the members of the projected college football playoff. But Arizona 25, Tulane 24, Georgia Tech fell down to 23. Pitt is at 22. They actually moved up, and they play Miami. Arizona State's at 20. Tennessee's at 19. They moved up. Virginia moved up a little bit to number 18. SC is at 17. There's Texas hanging around in the weeds. Texas reminds me a whole lot of the 2024 Ole Miss Rebel team.
I'm surprised, that Texas actually moved up, and I say that I know they took care of Arkansas this weekend, but it wasn't their best showing. And I thought Arkansas still played a heck of a game in terms of all 4 quarters. But it's funny enough that Texas, in a way, is still in that mix. Michigan will have Ohio State to end the season, and that'll be a fun game for them in terms of they have a good push to move into the playoffs. And there's some teams in front of Texas that could drop over the last college football regular season this upcoming weekend. So I think Texas is not out of it, but I still think there's still lots to play for teams in that kind of 18, 17 and up spots in terms of who can make the college football playoffs this year. I think it's just a lot of still opening spots.
Yeah, Michigan comes in at number 15. So that kind of cool that the Wolverines have just kind of fought their way into the top 15 and with a true freshman quarterback, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they have, and especially with a lot of the coaching, problems that they've had to go through this season, and the coach being suspended for a few games as well. Michigan's really been resilient this year, and it speaks to the culture that they have and the recruiting they've had as well has been phenomenal. So Wolverines have done a fantastic job this year.
Yeah, quite impressive. Now we're waiting on number 14, and of course, once we get into the actual playoff teams, number 14 is Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt has not moved up at all, even though they looked pretty impressive against their last opponents. Like, they blew Kentucky out of the water.
Yeah, they did. It was a strong showing for Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt. They continue to surprise me. And, at 9-2, I hate it because they came back against Texas and were very close to pulling off a huge upset in Austin not too long ago. And they really deserve to come back and win it again. So I think that loss may haunt them a little bit. But like I said, there's still things to happen. Miami could very well lose to Pitt, this weekend and drop out of that race and move Vanderbilt up. So there's still a lot of movement that can happen over the next, few games.
And Utah being ranked ahead of Vanderbilt is weird because Utah gave up 500 yards rushing to Kansas State and really should have lost that game. Miami moved up into number 12. So they kind of jumped Utah. I guess number 11 will be BYU whenever they do that. But Miami moving up, it's just the ACC is a weird thing. There's a scenario, I think, where 6 teams are tied for the conference championship.
Yeah. I feel like that's the committee's trying to push Miami to get that last spot for the ACC, moving them up a spot this weekend, and hopefully they take care of Pitt if you're the committee's mindset. But I think that's an interesting spot for them to be in, especially the way that I guess the last month and a half unraveled for them this year.
Yes. And number 11, BYU. There it is right there. So we're getting into the top 10, which will be interesting because, to my knowledge, nobody in the top 10 lost last week.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
So it should be the same rating as it was last week, and we all assume that it won't be because Oregon won a game against USC at home. Does that cause them to jump Ole Miss? There's actually people out there, I'm not even joking about this, that thinks Oklahoma is going to jump Ole Miss, even though Oklahoma has 2 losses and Ole Miss beat them in Norman. So there's a lot of conspiracy theorists out there right now. Alabama is number 10. Alabama comes in at number 10. We'll see what's going on. And before we get out of here, when we come back, we'll finish up the last ranking of what's going on. We are the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, Dalen Flowers. We'll be right back. All right, Notre Dame came in at number 9. That was interesting to me. That's about where they need to be. I still don't think that Notre Dame should be ranked higher than Miami. I think that's wrong. They both have 2 losses, and Miami beat them head-to-head. The only reason Notre Dame's in the top 10 is because they are Notre Dame. Honest, I can't get over that. Number 8's likely Oklahoma, if we're going to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see exactly.
That's a hot topic, my friend. You may stir up some feathers with that Notre Dame take. I don't disagree with you, though.
Yeah, it's one of those things. If you lose to Miami, you cannot be ranked below or ahead of the team that beat you, especially when the losses line up. Oklahoma is number 8, and now we are on Ole Miss watch. Is the next pick going to be Oregon, or is it going to be Ole Miss? That is the question. Will the recency bias of USC propel the Oregon Ducks over the Ole Miss Rebels, who dropped down after they beat the Citadel, and this bye week is another excuse to potentially drop them down again. We'll see exactly how it goes. We're expecting them to drop us down, if we're going to be completely honest about that. But we'll see whenever that gets named. So there it is, Ole Miss number 7. They found a way to drop Ole Miss down again. I'm telling you, it's a situation, if you drop Ole Miss 2 spots, even with a win over Mississippi State, which is absolutely possible, Ole Miss could find themselves missing a playoff game over politics. Nothing more than politics. Absolutely nothing more than politics. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's absolutely ridiculous. Ole Miss is literally one play away from being 11-0 and ranked number 2 in the country.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's weird too, because, I gave the committee, a great fondness a few weeks ago when they initially, I had Oregon, I think, in maybe 9 or 8 because of at the initial, rankings. I thought that was the perfect spot for them. Their best win was against, I think, Northwestern. They lost to Indiana at home. And this win against, USC this weekend doesn't propel them in terms of a resume standing, in terms of an overall team standing over Ole Miss. So, like I said, we asked me earlier, I'm not surprised that the committee has done this. But just like internally, it doesn't make much sense to me at all. And you see that current standing of Ole Miss and Alabama in terms of the playoff matchups in the first round. Again, that'd be fascinating. That'd be fun. But we'll see what the committee does moving forward as the season gets ready to go into its final stage this weekend.
Yeah, I'm at the point where I just want chaos.
Yeah.
Now, Alabama traveling to Ole Miss for the first round game would be interesting. They're matched up with Indiana. That's probably a good matchup as well. And the winner of that game gets Texas A&M. You avoid Georgia and Ohio State. And those are the 2 worst matchups, in my opinion. All in all, it's not a bad draw. I just don't like that Oregon jumped Ole Miss for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, me either. And because I think that, some people may honestly be undervaluing the way Ole Miss went to Norman, Oklahoma and beat the Oklahoma Sooners. And, this is a defense that at that time was the number 1 total defense in the country. And since the Ole Miss loss have continued to propel to be one of the best defenses of the country. But Ole Miss came in there offensively and they dominated on every aspect. They came in there and, shot themselves in the foot a few times against Oklahoma, but really mishandled the Oklahoma defense and made them looking like a second-tier defense. And I think that's something that's honestly been undervalued from a lot of media perspectives and the committee this season. I think that Oklahoma win is very, very big for Ole Miss this year, not just winning, the way that they controlled their own destiny in that game too.
Yes, Ole Miss is the lowest ranked 1-loss team. So that is worth remembering. All right, Dalen, do you need to get out of here, bud?
I got a few more minutes, my friend. A few more minutes.
All right, so if you need to jump off, hop off. We're good to go, but let's take some questions real quick. Let's see. We got CJ Spencer, 1998. Does Ole Miss have channels to conduct a coaching search without Jimmy Sexton getting involved? Are we stuck dealing with his client base? John Summerall is not a Jimmy Sexton client, for instance, if he ends up there. There are a few coaches to where there are not Jimmy Sexton clients. And honestly, Ole Miss probably need that. And that they can get away from this will, because that's what it is. Big Senator says, I agree with Dalen. We control our own destiny. Just keep winning, Kiffin or no Kiffin. You're absolutely right there. And H.W. Norton 1 says, Chancellor Boyce is in charge of the negotiations now, and he'll put together a great offer to Kiffin. Also, Kiffin is hearing from people that he respects that would be foolish of him to leave UM. All right. I get this, okay? And this is the one thing that I need everybody to understand. If this happens, there is going to be so much work required by Lane Kiffin to repair relationships. And I'm not talking about Joe Fan out there. I'm not talking about Dalen sitting over there, a student going to games. I'm talking about money boosters. I'm talking about money for NIL. All of that stuff has to be repaired. It's more than just winning. So keep that in mind as this moves forward. Let's see. Gary Grizzard says, why can't this just be about playing football and making history in Mississippi, and y'all are worried about a coach? and it's to be about the players. Hey, we would love to talk about the players. It's the coach that made it about the coach. That's the problem. And besides, we're covering college football playoff rankings right now. So we're definitely. Big Center says, whatever, Ole Miss fans don't need to succumb to social media insanity. Let's keep our head on our shoulders and wait to see what happens and refuse to respond to internet gossip. That's not really how this works. I appreciate it, though. Dalen is a smart cookie by Big Senator again.
All right.
Jeff Coates. This is the show that talks about how Lane is creating a distraction and talks nonstop about Lane leaving. Yes, because that's the story. I didn't create this narrative. And I'm also the only show that covers Ole Miss that is covering this playoff ranking announcement. So you can't really have it both ways on that. All right, let's see.
They're coming at you hot.
I guess they're coming watching a live ranking show. Yes, we are. This is a live ranking reaction show. And Big Center says also, whatever happens, you're still the best in the Locked On Network and the best analyst out there. Steven, great job. Thank you very much. Jeff, that's all he's got to keep his YouTube metrics temporarily elevated. All before this happened, we were the most watched show in the Ole Miss sphere. Now we're the most watched show by like 3 million views. Okay, and that's public information. You could not like it, whatever. You're absolutely right about Notre Dame. Absolutely. Jeffrey Langley says you're 24th. Tulane's 24th. Kid Latin says why Ole Miss is 7th. They're 7th because Oregon beat USC and Ole Miss didn't play. It's a recency bias pick.
I do have to go, my friend. Great seeing you, and I appreciate you guys for tuning in tonight.
Take care. We'll talk to you next week, buddy.
All right.
So Dalen Flowers, come in and join the show. We're going to stream for just a little bit as well. Let's see what happened. Let's see. Take a couple of more questions and comments. Suez says the committee is a joke. It is. The Ole Miss absolutely should not be dropped down below Oregon. It rules for Ole Miss, penalize losses, ignore wins. Yeah, penalize that Georgia loss, but make the other losses okay. That's weird. Will I am says, I see a world where we're below Oklahoma, somehow even if we win. Insane. Absolutely. Tim Skelton, Rebels keep on winning, win all the way to the Natty. Yes. I put out a GIF. When was that? It was a while back. Maybe it was after the announcement from Keith Carter that said, the major league thing, there's only one thing left to do, go out and win the whole thing. That is there. Titans Mafia, Oregon over Miss shows the credibility of this committee. Ole Miss beats Oregon by 2 scores minimum and are 2-1 against other playoff teams. I agree 100% there. I don't know this one. SR 21968. Why is Texas Tech ahead of us? I don't know that one. Texas Tech got beat by Arizona State. Now, Arizona State, I think, no, they're not ranked. Arizona is now ranked. Yeah, it's definitely weird. And definitely punished for Lane's crap. I'd see a world where they just basically set things up for things to happen and to get results the way they want to get them. Ole Miss needs to win this game, or else they're going to find a way to not just move Ole Miss down to where they're traveling to a playoff game, but potentially not in the playoffs at all. Ole Miss has to win that game. Absolutely weird stuff. So thanks to everybody for joining the show. I do appreciate it very much, and thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the front door of Ole Miss. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps the show, and it's absolutely free. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC. Chris Gordy breaks down the best conference in all of college sports, from the rivalries to the championship and every game in between. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hotty toddy, and remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.